I'm just going to be straight with you guys here. There's going to be a lot of ground to cover today, and in order to properly convey the importance and the weight of the topic at hand, we need to start with a discussion on history. But I do promise we'll get to the book you're here for. Way back in the late 1890s, white supremacy was experiencing a growing expansion in Europe, resulting in the increased presence of anti-Semitic rhetoric. Seeing the growing anger and resentment for Jewish people in his country, one European Jewish citizen by the name of Mikhail Inkel Siglovich, along with his wife Sora Maita Kikels, I probably butchered those names, I'm so sorry, decided to immigrate to America in 1900. They would change their names to Michael and Sarah Siegel and move to Cleveland, Ohio. There they would have 6 children, the youngest of which would be Jerry Siegel. Due to the fact that Jewish people could only work in the roughest neighborhoods, Jerry's family moved to the Jewish neighborhood of Glenville in 1928, where he would attend Glenville High School and meet his lifelong friend and collaborator, Joe Shuster. Like Jerry, Joe is also a child of Jewish immigrants, with his father immigrating from Rotterdam in South Holland and his mother immigrating from Kyiv in Ukraine. The two instantly clicked and began working together to create artistic works. This would eventually lead them to the realm of comics, with Jerry on writing duties and Joe on illustration. They would hone their skills through their self-published magazine entitled Science Fiction, an Advanced Guard of Future Civilization, where they would publish their own sci-fi stories. The creation they would be most well known for would actually be conceived in 1933, with a story entitled The Reign of the Superman, with the Superman being a bald, evil scientist. The two would continue to develop the concept for many years after multiple rejections, deciding the character should instead be a force of good, with Shuster designing his suit after the traditional circus strongman. He would be from another planet, essentially an immigrant like their parents. He would hide this from the world by wearing the attire of a traditional American journalist at the time, giving him the name Clark Kent. This would all accumulate in 1938 with the official premiere of Superman in Action Comics #1, where he worked at the Daily Star with Lois Lane and had the power of super strength and speed. Superman would become so successful that a radio show would be commissioned starring the character in 1940, not long after the Germans started to systematically target the Jewish people in their country, while America was still relying on the Jim Crow laws. It was during this radio show where some of the most well-known elements of Superman would be created, like Perry White, Kryptonite, the Daily Planet, and the ability to fly. Superman fought against many Nazi-themed villains, pushing back against the hateful principles the Nazis stood for. In 1944, President Roosevelt signed the GI Bill into law, allowing returning veterans from the war access to government funds, including funds and loans to cover housing and college expenses, while also allowing them to start their own businesses. This bill was a big deal among minority communities because there was no language in it that expressly forbid people of color from obtaining these benefits. This didn't sit well with Samuel Green, a Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan near Atlanta, Georgia, who wanted to inspire a second revival of the KKK after the first iteration fell some years ago. The end of the war saw that revival of the KKK, with membership soaring as non-white veterans from the war tried to use the benefits offered by the GI Bill. Many Chinese Americans were able to leave Chinatown because of the bill, but were often harassed and chased out by the KKK members. Black veterans had a much harder time accessing the benefits at all, as many of the administrative duties were handed over to local officials, who denied black veterans the loans they needed to get out of their impoverished neighborhoods, particularly in the South, where racism was heavily prevalent, and still is, quite frankly. Japanese Americans also suffered during this time, as their homes and businesses were taken away while they were locked in the Japanese internment camps, and had no homes to return to upon release. Basically, anyone that wasn't white were made well aware of just how little their country thought of them. But then, on June 10th, 1946, The Adventures of Superman, the most popular radio show at the time, released the first of a 16-part story entitled The Klan of the Fiery Cross. Allegedly receiving confidential Klan information from Stetson Kennedy, an activist who infiltrated the Klan, although there's some conflicting reports on this, The Klan of the Fiery Cross was a story about a young Asian American family who moved to Metropolis and are immediately targeted by a bigoted organization called, as I'm sure you've guessed, the Klan of the Fiery Cross, an obvious stand-in for the KKK. The story was a massive hit with listeners, and some believe it actually led to the downfall of the second iteration of the KKK, as the show revealed that the Klan was really a money-making scheme to sell robes, and Klan recruitment plummeted shortly thereafter. How much the radio show had to do with the weakening of the KKK's power is up for debate, but regardless, it made it extremely clear the values in which Superman stood for then and stands for now, as clearly illustrated in a speech he gives in episode 3 of the series.
The Klan of the Fiery Cross is made up of intolerant bigots, Jim. They don't judge a man in the decent American way by his own qualities. They judge him by what church he goes to and by the color of his skin. Now, intolerance is a filthy weed, Jim. told you before, the only way you can get rid of it is by hunting out the roots and pulling them out of the ground.
Many years later, Jean Luen Yang, experiencing his own hardships with discrimination and hate speech as a child, would take inspiration from this radio story and write his own version called Superman Smashes the Klan, released in 2020 with art by Gary Huru. Again, I apologize I butchered those names. The story starts at the Metropolis Dam in 1946, as Lois Lane, with her photographer Jimmy Olsen, run to intercept the Atom Man, the self-declared avenger of the master race, while he is in the process of trying to destroy the dam. Atom Man moves to attack the duo when he is stopped by Superman, who engages the Nazi-themed supervillain. This version of Superman takes after his initial incarnation in that he is super strong and fast, but doesn't have the ability to fly or any of other well-known powers. He attempts to disarm the Atom Man's suit, where he finds it is powered by kryptonite, except this is his first time experiencing the glowing green crystal, so he doesn't know what it is yet. He just knows that it seems to actively poison his body. But luckily, the crystal is quickly snatched away by Inspector Henderson, who takes it and Atom Man into police custody. Superman plays off his sudden illness with some flurry talk with Lois Lane before taking off on the city's electric wires. We are then introduced to the Lees, a Chinese-American family moving from Chinatown to the inner city of Metropolis. We largely see the lives of this family through the eyes of Roberta, the Lee's daughter, as they drive into the big city. She's accompanied by her brother, Tommy, and her parents, Dr. Lee, and his wife, who remains unnamed. Roberta's mother often switches between English and Chinese when speaking to her, but Dr. Lee often demands she speaks English, even when speaking their names. Meanwhile, back at the Daily Planet, Superman has reverted to his alter ego of mild-mannered reporter Clark Kent, who is having difficulty recovering after being exposed to the mysterious green crystal. He goes to the bathroom to cool off, but when he looks at the mirror, he sees his face has been transformed to that of an alien. Upon a second glance, however, it turns out to be just in his head. We then see the Lee's new home, as Dr. Lee throws away Roberta's favorite Chinese jacket, sewn by her mother, after she threw up on it in the car. He says it looks too antiquated, and they can afford to get her a new and better one. They are welcomed by Dr. Lee's boss and his colleague, Dr. Sigurd Wilson and Dr. William Jennings. They seem friendly at first, welcoming them to the neighborhood, but it doesn't take long before their racist views start to reveal themselves, along with their bitterness, with some racist remarks that I won't repeat. Dr. Lee doesn't seem to notice, though, as they give him a new lab coat and announce that he is the new chief bacteriologist for the Metropolis Health Department. Roberta and Tommy decide to take a walk around their new neighborhood and quickly run into Jimmy Olsen, who invites them to the Unity House, a community center on the other side of the neighborhood where the baseball team he manages is practicing. As it turns out, Tommy is a natural pitcher and immediately gains some popularity among his peers. Roberta isn't as lucky, as her awkwardness leaves her sidelined and taking the brunt of the casual racism those same peers are presenting. Jimmy offers Tommy a spot on the team, but one of the star pitchers, Chuck Riggs, isn't as impressed and challenges him on his pitching skills. Tommy tries to warn him not to crowd the plate, but Chuck just responds through racial slurs. This results in Tommy beaming Chuck in the arm, prompting more racist verbal abuse. When his unrepentant bigotry becomes more than clear, Jimmy immediately fires Chuck from the team. The argument begins to escalate, and Roberta angrily intervenes, calling Chuck a coward and forcing him to leave. Chuck tells his Uncle Matt what happened, who responds by calling the Lees devious, and tells Chuck he's taking him to a meeting. That same night, Uncle Matt reveals to his nephew that he is the Grand Scorpion for the Clan of the Fiery Cross, whose singular mission is to burn away America's impurities. Meanwhile, Superman is having his own struggles, as the smell brought on by the kryptonite has seemingly led to further hallucinations. He goes down to his family's kitchen, presumably while dreaming, and finds that his ma and pa have been replaced by aliens speaking a language he doesn't understand, but has heard before. This leads to a flashback to Smallville in 1926, where his father shows him a mysterious recording device speaking an alien language. This flashback seems to trigger something in his present life, as he suddenly begins to understand the alien couple. When Clark asks what's happening, they simply reply that he is remembering. Back at the Lee household, Roberta is being comforted by her mother, who tells her of her own story getting used to America when she first arrived, and provides the wisdom that, if you learn enough secrets about a place, it becomes home. Roberta doesn't have long to contemplate this, as the entire family is awoken by a burning cross on their front yard, lit by the Clan of the Fiery Cross. They shout and threaten them at every turn, claiming that these non-Americans are threatening their way of life and they can never become 100% Americans. Dr. Lee seems to believe he can convince them that they have the wrong idea about them, while Tommy goes for the direct approach and runs at them with a baseball bat. This is the moment they've been waiting for, as the Grand Scorpion forces their new initiate, Chuck, to throw a makeshift grenade at the nearby window. He misses, however, and the grenade lands at the feet of the Klansmen, forcing them to flee. While the Lees try to put out the fire, they are approached by 3 black men driving by who witness the burning cross and want to help. Dr. Lee panics at the sight of them and tries to shoo them away, saying they don't want any trouble. 2 of the gentlemen choose to leave at Dr. Lee's request, but one chooses to stay, revealing himself to be Inspector Henderson, at which point Dr. Lee quickly apologizes. The following morning, Clark and Lois come down to the house to report on the hate crime while Roberta's parents argue about whether or not to stay or move. Clark and Lois go over to comfort Roberta, who is sitting on the ground nearby. "I always kind of suspected that I don't belong. Last night, we got proof," she tells Clark. Clark responds by asking her what she wants to do. Does she want to leave or stay? Lois chimes in at this point and says that if they do stay, they will do their best to fight for them and identify those who attacked them. Roberta seems inspired by Lois's self-confidence and decides to tell her parents that she'd like to stay. Roberta's experience reminds Clark of his own, however, as we see another flashback to 1926, where a young Clark is sitting under a tree with a childhood friend, Pete Ross. While they're reading sci-fi comics, 2 local bullies come over and prepare to beat Pete up. Clark loses control of himself, hovers in the air, and tries to blast the bullies with his heat vision in an attempt to save Pete. Seeing just how different he is, though, Pete immediately rejects Clark after the bullies leave, giving Clark his own proof that he never belonged. The following day, Tommy is telling the story and making self-deprecating Asian jokes to the other kids at Unity House, while Roberta listens in dismay, recognizing that any of the kids could have been related, or even were, the monsters that attacked them the previous night. This leads to an argument between the 2 on the way home that results in Roberta marching off and leaving Tommy behind. The Clan of the Fiery Cross seizes this opportunity and kidnaps Tommy. Roberta suspects something is wrong when Tommy doesn't come home, and she goes off to investigate, finding his baseball cap on the ground nearby. She runs to the nearby white cop, telling him her fears, but the cop just dismisses her, saying that it's just too darn safe in Metropolis for people like you, even going so far as to imply that the city is trying to be too inclusive. Seeing that she's getting nowhere with the cop, she instead runs to the Daily Bugle and asks Jimmy Olsen to take her to see Chuck Riggs, believing him to be involved. Clark overhears the conversation and decides that this is a job for Superman, as he quickly changes into his supersuit and races off to follow them. Meanwhile, Tommy has gotten his kidnappers to talk, as the Grand Scorpion tries to justify his actions to him. He says there's no hate, never hate. He just thinks Chinatown is crowded, run down with drug addicts in every corner, and he doesn't want his people to bring their filth into his country. Tommy decides he's had enough and punches the Grand Scorpion before rolling out of the car, breaking his arm in the process. The Klansmen attempt to pursue, but Tommy jumps in the nearby river. Roberta and Jimmy have reached Chuck's home, and she angrily confronts him over his actions the previous day, recognizing him as one of the Klansmen. Chuck's response is to grab a baseball bat and start aggressively swinging at the 2 and yelling at them to leave. Roberta stands her ground, though, demanding he tell her what happened to Tommy. But before Chuck can cause any real harm, he is intercepted by Superman. Chuck, being a huge Superman fan, is initially starstruck at the sight of his hero, with Superman using this to convince him to tell them where they might find Tommy. If you might be able to help another person, you ought to at least try. Chuck relents and says he knows where the Klan conducts their rituals and he'd be willing to show them. Without a moment to lose, Superman races off to find Tommy with Roberta and Chuck under each arm, while Jimmy races off to get the inspector. Superman and the kids make it to the meeting place of the Klan, but finds nobody there. As they all try to figure out what to do next, Superman sees the ghostly aliens from his dreams who tell him to look through. This seems to trigger his X-ray vision for the first time, and he is able to locate Tommy, saving him from drowning. Inspector Henderson arrives shortly thereafter and offers to drive the kids to where they need to be, while Superman races Tommy to the hospital. Upon arrival, Superman gives Tommy to the doctors, but leaves not long after when he sees the ghostly aliens waiting for him outside. He questions them about who they are and what they want, but they simply reply back that they're his parents. They then ask a question of their own. Why are you willing to use some of your powers, but not others? This triggers yet another flashback, as the mother of the bullies Clark chased off is confronting his Earth parents about their son's actions, calling them demon-possessed and demanding they get out of town. She's quickly dismissed by the police, but it does initiate a conversation between Ma and Pa that Clark overhears while bringing the mysterious radio to them. He overhears them calling him an alien, and vowing to keep him as ordinary as possible so no one will ever take him away. While Clark processes information, the radio suddenly decides to go off, forcing Clark to run to the nearby lake, Lake Solitude, and throw it in. After which, he too vows to be ordinary. Perfectly ordinary. Clark snaps back to the present where his Kryptonian parents repeat their previous question. Why some powers, but not others? It's as if you only want to be half of who you actually are. During this time, the rest of the Lee family arrives at the hospital. But when their mother asks if it was the Klan that did this, Tommy chooses to lie and says he fell in the river. Roberta doesn't understand why he would do this, but she goes along with the lie for the time being. She quickly notices Superman standing outside and goes to return the cape he used as a sling for Tommy. Superman instead ties the cape around her neck and tells her he'd like her to keep it, because she was the real hero tonight. Roberta's mother quickly realized how much that meant to her, and begins working to make Superman's cape into a new jacket, to make Metropolis feel more like the home she left behind. The following morning, Clark goes into the office of the Daily Planet's editor-in-chief, Perry White, who also finds himself inspired by Superman's actions and decides he wants to stand up to the Klan too. As a result, he offers a $1,000 reward for any information that leads to the arrest of the Klan of the Fiery Cross. Chuck's Uncle Matt responds to this news about as well as you'd expect, and tells Chuck to stay away from the Unity House because they're at war, and seemingly threatens to blow the place up. At said Unity House, Tommy is bragging about his encounter with Superman, while one of the girls casually remarks that her grandpa says that Chinese people are sneaky, but her dad says they're hardworking and brave, so her dad must be right. Roberta interjects to call her out on her racist remarks, but attention is soon drawn to her new jacket, drawing admiration from her peers. For the first time, Roberta experiences some form of inclusion, and she actively enjoys it. But this joy is short-lived as Chuck bursts through the door moments later, desperately trying to convince everyone to leave the building without revealing he thinks his uncle planted a bomb. He successfully manages to convince everyone to go see a movie, and they all leave to go see Captain Desmo versus Genghis Akim, the Intergalactic Conqueror. Meanwhile, Lois and Clark are having coffee when she's explained how the Metropolis Health Department isn't actually associated with the government and is some kind of cover-up for Klan activity. Clark gets distracted, though, as he sees his Kryptonian parents waiting outside. He goes out to meet them on a nearby rooftop, and they ask him again, why only half of who you are? This causes Clark to remember how he met Lana Lang, who chases off his persistent bullies before Clark can lose control of his powers again. Lana is the first person he meets that treats him like an ordinary boy, his first experience with inclusion, and he actively enjoys it. So to respond to his parents' question, Clark says he loves being part of the human world. He's created a life here where no one is afraid of him. He wants that more than he wants his heritage, and he asks that his birth parents respect that and leave him be. Back at the theater, Roberta is watching the movie alone and dismayed, as she watches an American white hero fight an openly racist Asian caricature. I've been a weirdo all along, even with my old jacket, even in Chinatown, always watching from the sidelines, always looking for some clue that might help me fit in, never finding it. Roberta leaves the theater to find Tommy teaching Chuck how to throw a better fastball. Roberta takes the opportunity to confront Chuck yet again on his actions with the Klan, how he threw a grenade at their home. Chuck confesses and says he never wanted to hurt their family. Tommy chooses to believe him, because he's too good of a pitcher to miss a throw like that on accident. Chuck further admits that his uncle is the Grand Scorpion of the Klan, but despite his actions, he still believes he's a good man underneath, and he's been there for him and his mom when they needed him. He tries to justify further by saying that even if his uncle did attack Unity House, it won't matter because all the kids are here. Roberta is quick to remind him that there's still adults there, and she calls on Jimmy to take them all to the Unity House immediately. They arrive just in time to see two Klansmen crawling in through an open window, and they leap into action. Chuck and Tommy go to call the police and the Daily Planet, while Roberta and Jimmy go to stall the Klansmen until they can hopefully get Superman's attention. The ploy works as Superman arrives just as their encounter starts to get violent, as he echoes Roberta's previous nickname for the Klansmen, bigots and bedsheets. Superman tries to get information out of them, but one of the bigots just says that the community center is a threat to the purity of America. And if Superman loves his country, he would recognize that. In response, Superman promptly throws him up a tree. Superman manages to rescue the hostages, but fails to stop the bomb, as the Unity House is blown to bits. Meanwhile, back at the Daily Planet, Inspector Henderson has arrived to confront Perry White about the offer of reward money. saying that doing so scared off their main suspect. It turns out he doesn't have to look very far, though, as they are immediately ambushed by the Grand Scorpion and his fellow bigots. Back at the Unity House, Roberta is blaming herself for all of this, saying none of this would have ever happened if her family hadn't moved in. But Jimmy corrects her, saying that this was the actions of the Klan and the Klan alone, and if she never came, then they never would have met, and that's something worth celebrating. But both of them soon realized that the Unity House wasn't the Klan's only target. They race back to the Daily Planet only to have their suspicions confirmed, with the Golden Globe vandalized with a fiery cross. As Superman runs to the Daily Planet himself, he has one more flashback to a time where he went to the circus with Lana and sees the local strongman named Samson. Clark immediately recognizes the strongman as the man that took their tickets when they entered, but Lana dismisses it because, well, he has longer hair, and he's wearing a costume, and has a huge smile on his face. Clark isn't convinced, of course, but they don't have time to debate the matter further, as a lightning strike has caused a fire in the tent and everyone is forced to evacuate. Clark stays behind, however, because the show's lion decides to go after the strongman while he is saving the little girl. Clark stops the lion, and the two have a heart-to-heart outside over Pop. He confides in Samson that he's afraid that if people saw what he could do, they'd be afraid of him. But Samson comes up with a simple solution: wear a costume. Ma sews one up for him the next day, and Superman decides that he can't be an alien, but he can be a strongman and still help people. But it's still important to him that everyone sees him as human rather than what he actually is, what he denies for himself. Back in the present, Superman climbs to the top of the Daily Planet and puts out the fire while Roberta and Jimmy head up to the newsroom, where it is revealed that Perry, Lois, and Inspector Henderson have been taken hostage. Roberta is the first to notice a clue left by Lois Lane with the initials WJ. Roberta theorizes these are the initials of William Jennings, who she suspects of being a Klansman. Meanwhile, Tommy and Chuck are walking back to their neighborhood when Chuck asks him a question. While what happened at Unity City was wrong on every level, was it really so bad to want to live around only people who look like you? Tommy, rightfully, challenges this immediately and demands to know if he just wants him to leave and go back to Chinatown. But Chuck responds with the real reason he's asking. I want to know that my family's not evil. Tommy takes a moment and says the following. Back in Chinatown, the only baseball I ever got to play was pickup. The Unity House is the first team I've been on where all the players wear matching caps and jerseys. A real team, you know? I thought we were on the same team, Chuck. Are you saying we're not? Chuck doesn't offer a good response, and Tommy leaves him behind. At the Klan's headquarters, the Grand Scorpion is attempting to intimidate his captives, while Inspector Henderson tries to divert their attention to him. Lois decides to take a different approach and just makes fun of them. Just as the Grand Scorpion is going to cut them down for their laughter, however, Superman bursts through the wall and makes short work of them. One of the bigots in bedsheets accidentally lights himself on fire, at which point Inspector Henderson quickly moves to put it out. The Klansman becomes angry at this, claiming he contaminated him simply by touching him, and then attacks him with a torch. He goes out like a light, though, as the inspector knocks him out with a single punch. After the scuffle, Perry hands Inspector Henderson his badge back, but it's dented and ruined. Perry tries to reassure him that the badge doesn't make him an officer, but Henderson replies, unfortunately, not everyone in Metropolis sees it that way. Superman goes to confront the Grand Scorpion himself, but he isn't having it. Instead, the Grand Scorpion rants about how they are a movement he can never truly smash to bits, that you cannot unite a people that share neither blood nor history, that whatever he did to become Superman wouldn't have worked with inferior blood, that Superman is living proof of how superior a white man could be. Superman has enough at this point and takes them all to jail, but is released shortly after by a white officer who reveals his allegiance to the Klan. While that is happening, though, Superman takes Roberta back to her home, but in a moment of bravery, Roberta challenges him on how he perceives himself and how she sees he's limited himself, holding back the real power she knows he's capable of. Superman gives her permission to express why she thinks that is, and this is how she replies. You want to fit in better. You want everyone to believe that you're just a better version of a normal human. Humans run, you just run faster. Humans jump, you just jump higher. Humans lift stuff, you just lift heavier stuff. But the truth is, you can do things that are entirely different from what humans can do, right? Like fly. And you hold back because you're afraid that if people find out, they'll stop calling you Superman. Instead, they'll call you super something else. Superman replies that he doesn't try to think about all that because trying to do so could cause him to lose his mind. But Roberta doesn't let him get away with that excuse. She says that because he limits who he is to fit in with the people he wants to live with, people could have gotten seriously hurt tonight. He could have stopped all of them if he just stopped trying to fit himself to the mold society wants him to be. Or in other words, I wish it were okay for you to fly. Superman takes Roberta's words to heart and heads back to Smallville to track down the radio he dropped into the lake so long ago. But upon arrival, he sees that the radio has broken open and created a crystal fortress deep underwater, where his Kryptonian parents are waiting, looking much more humanoid. Meanwhile, Uncle Matt has gone to meet with the Grand Imperial Mogul, revealed to be Dr. Wilson, to request for aid. But Dr. Wilson instead berates him for all the bad publicity he's drummed up. In Wilson's mind, this will drastically ruin their new membership drive, which he expects to net them thousands and thousands of dollars. He reveals to the confused Klansmen that their entire supposed mission is just a scam to convince simpletons to buy into the hate they sell. He further reveals that all of their efforts have actually been to build weaponry to kill the real threat, Superman. But not everyone is on board with the Metropolis Health Department's plan, as back at the Lee household, Dr. Lee reveals that he has left his position at the department because he no longer believes in their mission. With encouragement from a briefly visiting Lois Lane, Roberta decides to investigate. Meanwhile, back in the Fortress of Solitude, Superman's parents reveal his Kryptonian heritage and the message his parents left him as he flew off their dying planet. Little one, though we send you to a foreign people, may you find a home with them. May you find trust and love. May you be together with them, dear son. May your tomorrow and theirs be one. And he has. He found a home. He found a life. And now it was time to stop denying an important part of that life. His birth parents reassure him by saying that he'll always be part of his adopted world, but he'll always be part of them too. Back at the Lee household, Roberta has uncovered the plans of the Metropolis Health Department for herself, finding a lead ball containing kryptonite, realizing the reason her father left the department is because he no longer believes Superman is a threat. Meanwhile, Dr. Wilson reveals that he has obtained the Atom Man and all his belongings, and successfully uncovered the source of his power. Using the power of kryptonite, he has fashioned weapons designed to kill Superman, believing him to be the real alien. He then further lectures to Matt that he doesn't really believe people are divided by color, they're divided by power, and the more power he has, the closer he is to godhood. Matt labels Wilson a traitor of his own kind and proceeds to kill him on the spot. The following day at the baseball game, themes seem to be turned around for the Lee family, as Dr. Lee makes amends to Inspector Henderson for helping the night of the attack and for being a good neighbor, and Roberta seems to finally have success at making friends. But it isn't long before things escalate, as the Grand Scorpion takes Roberta hostage and storms the field wielding kryptonite weaponry. He rants about how everyone here is supporting a symbol of an impure America, and that doing so will tear their city apart. Inspector Henderson gets up to intervene, but is stopped by another police officer who holds him at gunpoint. It's at this moment that Chuck finally turns on his uncle, declaring his actions evil and attacking him with a baseball bat, while Roberta and Tommy begin attacking as well. The Grand Scorpion immediately turns on Chuck for his betrayal and prepares to shoot them all with what looks to be a heavy cannon. But suddenly, a red beam interrupts his concentration as Superman reveals himself, flying and using his heat vision. The crowd immediately reacts with fear and then with hate when Superman admits he's an alien. The crowd encourages the Grand Scorpion to attack, so he does so, and Superman is powerless against his weaponry. Luckily, Roberta realizes that lead can stop the radiation and throws the lead ball she found to Superman to block the beam. The kids cheer as the cannon explodes, and Inspector Henderson uses the distraction as an opportunity to knock out the racist officer. That wasn't the only trick Grand Scorpion has, though, as he reveals he has strapped himself to a suicide vest and is prepared to die a martyr. Without hesitation, Superman flies up into the air and disarms the vest. When Grand Scorpion asks Superman why he would fight for the Lees, he replies that he takes care of his own. Grand Scorpion scoffs at this, saying he's been brainwashed by corrupt newspapers and textbooks, that they have no blood and history to bound them together, that a nation bound by nothing cannot last. But we are bound together, Superman replies. The Lees and I, our friends of the Daily Planet and the Unity House and the police department, everyone down there really. We are bound together by the future. We all share the same tomorrow. Grand Scorpion refuses to accept that and tries to attack Superman one more time with a kryptonite dagger, saying he'd rather have no tomorrow at all. But even that isn't enough to give him the martyrdom he wants, because despite what he wants to be true, there's always a tomorrow. Sometime after, Roberta goes to the Daily Planet to visit Lois Lane to return a gift she gave her during her last visit. A journalist's pen in a box with the initials LL. Roberta assumes the initials stand for Lois Lane, and that it is a hand-me-down gift, but Lois corrects her. The initials aren't hers. They stand for Roberta's real name, Lan Xin Li, and Lois wants her to use the pen to join the Daily Planet. She takes Lois up on her offer and becomes Lan Xin Li, cub reporter for the Daily Planet in the City of Tomorrow, a place she can now call home. Now, I want to address something important before we begin our analysis in earnest. This book is very clearly and unapologetically meant to be told through the eyes of an Asian American family. The author, who is also Asian American, has made that intention very clear. While the topic of how other races are treated by white supremacists is addressed, it's not the focus. Therefore, this book should not be interpreted as a commentary on how all different races are treated in the eyes of white supremacy, because it's not. As we established earlier with our discussion on the GI Bill, other races can be and are discriminated against on very different levels, and they shouldn't all be lumped together under one "this is what discrimination looks like" umbrella. It's a very complicated subject that I'm not going to pretend to even remotely understand. All that being said, what this book has to say about how you respond to that discrimination as an individual and as a people, I believe, can be applied more universally, and that's what I like to focus on today. Now granted, I am a white male in America, and as such, come from a very privileged position, so I can only project so much understanding on a topic I have no frame of reference for. But I am trying to understand, and I'm trying to listen. I think studying this book has, at least in part, helped further that education. Because Superman Smashes the Klan ultimately has a say about white supremacy and the people that follow it is simple. They're not worth it. They're not worth trying to convince they are wrong, they're not worth trying to appease, and they're not worth changing yourself for. And in fact, to try to change who you are to fit in with a racist society not only limits who you can be on the world stage, but actively harms those around you who need you to be all you can be. Because in doing so, you have to hide an important part of who you are, which does nothing to actually further societal equality. And that's the central struggle that the Lee family experiences through the crux of the story, and Superman as well, but we'll get to that. Dr. Lee goes into a white suburban neighborhood with the intention of fitting in with his white colleagues, hiding his cultural heritage and his ethnicity in every way possible. He forces his wife to speak English even when they're alone. He throws away his daughter's favorite jacket because it reflects her Chinese heritage. His first response to the Klan is to try to convince them how white they really are and to reject help from their black neighbors because of their ethnicity. These are just a few of Dr. Lee's actions that demonstrate just how much he wants to fit into the new white culture as much as possible by hiding his own family's heritage. And in the end, it doesn't change a single thing. He's still actively discriminated against. He realizes a lot of what he's been led to believe that the people he perceives as enemies, by white standards, are wrong. And even the racist people that do tolerate him fully admit they only do so as long as the foreigners, like him, know their role and don't threaten their power. Tommy hides himself too, to a lesser extent, to fit in with his white peers the minute he feels included in something. And in doing so, diminishes his own experiences and hurts those around him. He lies about the Klan's kidnapping because he's afraid if he acknowledges what he went through, then he'll be forced to leave, but denies his own pain by doing so. He makes racist Asian jokes in front of his white peers and doesn't call out their acts of casual racism, which lets him be more popular among the group, but actively alienates his own sister in the process. This just makes her feel more and more alone, as she is the only one who actively doesn't try to change who she is just to fit into the white culture. In fact, she's the only one who seems openly uncomfortable with even trying, and the most aware of how people treat her and her family as a result. She's the only one that calls out acts of casual racism whenever she talks to white girls her own age, and she seems actively aware of how this white culture acts towards and portrays Asian people. This is particularly clear when she's at the theater and she just sits there uncomfortably as she watches her ethnicity be treated as an evil alien defeated by the white man. A thinly veiled allegory for America fighting off Asian immigrants before they conquer the country. And also a piece of fictional propaganda that mirrors the same kind of anti-Chinese propaganda created in the late 30s. She doesn't acknowledge this uncomfortableness explicitly, and she might not be aware that's what she's feeling, but the book makes it pretty clear she's feeling it, and it makes her feel alone. Unlike anyone else in her family, she is aware that the way people talk to or about her and how society treats people of color isn't normal, and it's not right. But it's that same awareness that helps her connect with Superman, because she recognizes that he, like her family, is actively suppressing who he is to fit into a white society. Because, for all intents and purposes, Superman is an alien. He's an immigrant, coming from a far-off land and trying to make a better life in America. That's what he's supposed to represent, after all: truth, justice, and the American way, and the dream that anyone can make a life here. But he realized early on that the more he presented parts of his heritage, the more people started to recognize him as a foreign immigrant. So instead of expressing himself and his full potential, giving everything he has to offer to his new home, he pulls back, because he doesn't want the white society he finds himself in to feel like he's a threat to them. He wants to belong, he wants to connect, he wants to build, but he can't do any of that if they decide he's an other. Which is why he models himself as a strong man rather than as an immigrant, because a strong man is still seen as one of them, and therefore acceptable. This is explicitly stated when the Grand Scorpion says Superman is proof of everything the white man can be. But it's not what America can be. Not the America Superman wants to be a part of anyway. Because it is infested. But not by foreigners like the Klan would have you believe, but by people like the Klan. People who believe in a hateful, illogical ideology who have no intention of changing their minds no matter what you do. They can't be appeased, they can't be appealed to, and they can't be convinced. Anyone that actually changes their mind and sees the light is just a traitor to their race in their eyes. So why do we, as a nation, spend so much time and energy trying to appeal to these people? People who have made it clear that they will always look down on anyone that isn't part of pure America. People who march in the streets with tiki torches shouting hate speech. People who have voted in open racists and even white supremacists into positions of government. Why do we continuously act as if these people are not only a critical part of our country, but necessary to make positive change? Because they are not, and they never will be. But the reason we continuously try to appeal to them is because they are led by people with power. People that actively sell a commodity of hate.
Last night, I tell you, to watch that thing on television as I did. Yeah. To see those monkeys from those African countries. Damn them, they're still uncomfortable wearing shoes.
See, the Grand Mogul, while wrong about damn near everything, was right about one thing. The world is divided by power. And it is in the best interest of those in power to convince the ignorant and the angry to hate and divide each other so they don't see who the real enemy is and unite. And these salesmen, these hate profiteers, are not just one little cult. They're ingrained in our culture. Racism and hate is systematic. It is in the very DNA of America and has been since its very discovery. And these hate mongers, the ones with power that realize how strong hate can be, are in the highest forms of government. And they cannot be smashed, and they cannot all be converted from their hate. Because hate and racism appeal to the ignorant. It's an opportunity for small people to feel superior, and a strong majority will not give that up. And that's why the only proper way to respond to this bigotry is to not try to bend over backwards for them, thinking that you can appeal to their better humanity. That only serves to give them more power, and that's not acceptable under any circumstances. You can't change a racist society from the inside by pretending the problem doesn't exist. That has never worked to overhaul a corrupt system. A great example of this is actually Inspector Henderson, who makes it very clear he knows exactly what kind of society he lives in, despite being a part of it. He claims his badge is basically his only shield from systematic racism, but his own fellow police officers also make it very clear how much hate they're harboring towards him regardless. That's not to say you can't change the minds of some racists. Some of them can come around, but it really depends on how solidified their worldview is, especially when they're young and still learning. Take Chuck, for example. The only one caught in the web of the Klan that actually makes it out. But it's not because Tommy panders to him, but because he challenges him. And he's young enough for his beliefs not to be set in stone. But he's the outlier, not the average, as similar attempts to appeal to the racist adults in the book fail spectacularly each and every time. Which reflects real life, because for every racist willing to change their views, there's plenty more willing to take their place. Trying simply to convince hateful people that hate is bad doesn't actually solve the systematic issues. The fact of the matter is, hate gives these people power, and they can and will do everything they are able to keep it that way, to keep others down so they can flaunt their perceived authority. And the problem isn't going away. Hell, let's just take a look at everything that's happened in 2020 alone. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, racial discrimination and attacks against Asian Americans has risen dramatically. Because racists have blamed them for bringing the disease to the country, and anger and hatred are fueled by our own president, who keeps trying to label it the China virus. Thousands of immigrants are still trapped in horrendous internment camps across the US that, for some reason, we just kind of stopped talking about. Health protection laws for LGBTQ+ people have been removed by the White House, which will allow for complete discrimination by health officials. Well, the recent Supreme Court ruling might rule that out, but it's unclear as of right now. And Black Americans have been systematically targeted, beaten, killed, arrested, and more by a corrupt and hateful police force, seemingly just because they can. Frequently targeted by white people who call the police on them just because they exist, and that's if they just don't kill them themselves. Stripped of their rights at every opportunity, and continuously told all the horrendous treatment they receive is actually their fault. And that's all only the tip of the iceberg of things that have happened just this year. And all but one of the examples I just gave are actions caused by our own government, fueled by our own government, or government-funded organizations. Racism hasn't gone anywhere, and people in power are still stoking the fires of hate whenever possible, and they will continue to do so. But according to Yang, this hate can still be combated. You can change society for the better, and the way to do that is to not change yourself for them. It's to stand up for your culture, stand up for your heritage and your right to be. To demand as they see you and not conform to what they want you to be. Because everyone deserves to be seen and treated with the respect that should come with that, regardless of if you were immigrated here or you were born here. It is not the job of the diverse people to change for the dominant race. It's the job of the dominant race to change for you, to recognize you, to accept you. You are under no obligation to change a damn thing about yourself, and you shouldn't have to for the right to live in a country that is supposed to be the land of the free. If you live in America, you are American, period. And that is why I believe Yang chose to include Superman in this story, despite the fact that the character is predominantly white. Because Superman has historically always represented not just hope and optimism, but the best we can be, and the best America can be. Because Superman will always, always, always stand for truth, justice, and the American way. But not the American way that means you have to be blindly loyal to your government and worship the very ground you walk on. He stands for the American way that says, I came to this country when I had nothing and nowhere else to go, and I made a life here. I made something worth keeping, something worth fighting for, and I will fight tooth and nail to make sure you can too. That's the American way. Not blind patriotism, not worshiping a flag or a president or some bullshit standard that white people deem society should be. The American way means we accept you, you are welcome, and you don't need to change who you are to be here. At least that's the way it damn well should be, and it can be. But not until we eliminate this myth of a pure America. It has never been pure, and it never will be good. Because we can be messy and complicated and chaotic, and that's the way it should be. It gives us the opportunity to see beyond ourselves, to make our society better by accepting the ideas from people from all walks of life. Just because we are messy and complicated does not mean we cannot and should not stand together, because that's what unity is. It's not everyone looking, feeling, and thinking in the same way. It's picking one long-term goal and coming together to make it happen, using the wealth of ideas and knowledge that comes from the different people, cultures, and ideology that actually make our country great. But as long as anyone insists that it must be one race or one ideology, we will never know unity. Because the ones who insist on this are willfully ignorant cowards, and they cannot be logicked out of an illogical worldview. Some racists might actually come around and renounce their hateful ways. Cool, they're welcome to join if they actually want to make up for the shit they pulled. But if 2020 has taught us anything, it should be that constantly trying to appeal to the better nature of racist, spiteful, greedy hate mongers is a complete waste of time and only serves to give them more power. And the only people more dangerous than the ones who actually believe this illogical and horrifying belief system are the ones who are smart enough to exploit it and the stupidity of its believers. I know some of you are going to say that we should work hard to change the minds of racists and hate mongers. Here's the thing. We've tried that over and over and over again in the vain hope that something will change. But look back again at 2020, where hundreds of thousands of people marched to the streets and said, I exist, see me. And look at the response it got from the people with power, people with hate. The people that hold that inflexible viewpoint are not the victims their allies try to paint them as. They're not the disenfranchised, and they are not the cornerstone of our country. They are not the teeming masses we need to appeal to change things for the better. They are part of a dying breed, a people used to power, a people threatened by unity. A people that can and have done anything and everything to crush unity wherever it sprouts, working tirelessly to keep themselves in power. And if I sound angry, it's because I am. And you can call me biased for that all you want, But how can you look at all the videos and the testimony and the perspectives that people of color have to give and not be angry? How can you not be angry at the legion of entitled white men and women who continue to stomp on the American way? And quite frankly, if you're not angry or upset, then you're part of the problem. Granted, again, I am a straight white male. I am probably in the most privileged position you can imagine in this country, and I am furious that the privilege even exists, because that means there are so many people that suffer because they are not part of that privilege. And if I'm angry, from my perspective, I can't even begin to imagine the struggle and the anger and the pain from those who have suffered the indignity, the lack of humanity that so many people of color have suffered through. That is not the America I was raised to believe we are. And we never have been that America, but we can be. You know why? Because during the same event where the racists and bigots that are deeply embedded in our society revealed themselves to the monsters they are, the people unified. They took everything their enemies had and they didn't stop. Despite every dirty trick that was thrown at them, despite every cruel injustice, they kept marching. They showed what unity behind the American way looks like. A recognition of everyone as deserving of the same rights as everyone else, to be accepted as they are, and not what the racist white men want them to be. They pushed for the America Superman fights for, a world where dignity, honor, and justice are the reality we all share. And it's been working. As more and more people who witness the injustice done to them turn to support them. They're changing the cultural perception of their struggle, and it's forcing those in power to listen. How much permanent change it will cause is still unclear, but one thing that is clear is just how much power unity has and what it can do to push back the real bigots and bedsheets. And that means we can do it again. We can continue to unify. It doesn't necessarily mean we need to keep marching for that entire time, although you're more than welcome to, but we can keep pushing back against the deeply ingrained white supremacy that has infested our nation since its very inception. We can keep pushing back against those threatened by that unity until their power is gone. By standing together and saying, we will not change for you, you need to change for us. Because no one should feel subservient to the whims of white supremacists, racists, or hate mongers of any kind. No one should feel like they have to change who they are and what they believe to match some kind of ideal imposed onto them, and then be rejected regardless. No one should feel like they are lesser, worthless, and unwanted. Not here, not anywhere. But despite everything, despite our long history with violence, racism, and bigotry in our country, I still hope. I still believe we can find a path to the American way. And maybe that hope comes from a limited perspective or ignorance, but I've seen it in the eyes of the people fighting for it. The words they speak, the tears they shed, they make a dream of the greatness America can achieve possible. To make America a true home for all. An America where we are all bound together by the future. An America where we all share the same tomorrow.